Jake Martinez stood at the edge of the viewing platform, his hands gripping the metal rail so tight his knuckles turned white. Below him, the combat arena of Nexus Prime stretched out like a gladiator pit from ancient Earth. The floor was made of some kind of energy-absorbing material that could take hits from weapons that would blow holes through starship hulls. Around the circular arena, hundreds of alien beings filled the seats, their voices creating a noise that sounded like 1,000 different languages all mixed together. Jake had been a ship commander for 12 years. He had fought space pirates, survived 3 different wars, and negotiated with species so strange they barely seemed real. But right now, watching his communications officer prepare for a fight that could get her killed, he felt more helpless than he ever had before. Amy. Burke checked her gear one more time. She wore simple combat clothes. No armor, no weapons, just the basic protection suit that all fighters had to use in the arena. The rules were clear. Hand-to-hand combat only. No outside help. Fight until one person could not continue. She looked small down there. Amy was 5 feet and 6 inches tall, which was average for a human woman. She kept herself in good shape, like all military personnel had to do. But compared to what she was about to face, she looked like a child. The crowd noise got louder as her opponent entered the arena from the other side. Corvin the Dominator walked like he owned the place. He was 7 feet tall and covered in scales that looked like natural armor. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and when he moved, Jake could see muscles rippling under those scales. The Zephyrian warrior had never lost a fight in this arena. He had defeated champions from 6 different species, and some of those species were a lot stronger than humans. Jake remembered how this whole mess had started. They had come to Nexus Prime for what should have been a simple trade meeting. The human fleet needed supplies, and the station had everything they wanted. The negotiations had been going well until Corvin and his delegation showed up. The Zephyrians controlled 3 star systems and thought they were better than everyone else. During the trade talks, Corvin had made it clear what he thought about humans joining the galactic community. "These soft-skinned weaklings want equal treatment," Corvin had said, his voice carrying across the meeting room. "Look at them. No natural weapons, no armor, no superior strength. They are barely above the level of pets. Why should we treat them as equals when they are obviously inferior?" The other species at the meeting had stayed quiet. Some seemed to agree with Corvin. Others looked uncomfortable but did not want to make the big Zephyrian angry. Jake had felt his temper rising, but before he could say anything, Amy had stood up. "I challenge that statement," she had said in her calm, clear voice. Corvin had laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "You challenge me, little human? Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Amy had replied, "and I am formally challenging you to single combat to defend the honor of humanity." The room had gone dead silent. Under galactic law, any being could challenge another to combat if their honor or their species' honor was questioned. It was an old law that most people thought was just tradition, but it was still legal and binding. Corvin's eyes had lit up with cruel pleasure. "I accept your challenge, Softskin. When I am done with you, everyone will know exactly where humans belong in the order of things." Now, 6 hours later, they were here. Jake had tried to talk Amy out of it. So had the rest of the crew. But Amy had been firm in her decision. "Someone has to stand up for us," she had said. "If we back down now, every species in the galaxy will think they can treat us like second-class citizens." The arena announcer, some kind of floating jellyfish creature, began speaking in the common galactic language. Jake's translation device picked up the words. "Citizens of the galaxy, we witness today a formal challenge of honor. Representing the Zephyrian Empire, Corvin the Dominator, undefeated champion of the combat rings. Representing the human species, Lieutenant Amy Burke of the vessel Defiant." The crowd cheered louder for Corvin. A few beings in the human section tried to cheer for Amy, but their voices were lost in the noise. Jake looked around at the other humans who had come to watch. Captain Lisa Harper sat 2 rows down, her face showing no emotion, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. Commander Nick Peterson was taking notes on a data pad. probably trying to figure out the best way to handle the political mess that would follow, no matter who won. The truth was, even if Amy won, it would not solve all their problems. But if she lost badly, it would make things much worse for humans everywhere. Down in the arena, both fighters moved to the center circle. The floating announcer gave the final rules. No killing blows, but everything else was allowed. The fight would continue until one fighter could not get up or surrendered. Amy looked up at the viewing section and found Jake's eyes. She gave him a small nod, then turned her attention to Corvin. The big warrior was flexing his muscles and showing off for the crowd. He probably outweighed Amy by at least 100 pounds, and his reach was much longer than hers. But Jake had seen Amy train. He knew she was faster than she looked, and smarter than most people gave her credit for. She had studied every fighting style the human military taught and a few they did not officially teach. More importantly, she never gave up. Jake had seen her work through problems that would have broken other people. The announcer's voice filled the arena. "Fighters ready?" Both Amy and Corvin raised their hands. "Begin!" The crowd exploded into noise as the two fighters began to circle each other. Jake held his breath and prayed to whatever gods might be listening that Amy knew what she was doing. The future of humanity's place in the galaxy might depend on what happened in the next few minutes. The moment the fight began, Corvin moved with surprising speed for someone so large. He did not waste time with fancy moves or showing off. This was a warrior who had killed enemies in real combat, not just arena fights for entertainment. Amy tried to keep her distance, moving in a circle around the bigger fighter. She knew she could not match his strength, so she had to be smart about this. Her plan was to tire him out and look for weaknesses. But Corvin was not going to give her that chance. The Zephyrian warrior lunged forward, covering the distance between them in 2 quick steps. His first punch was aimed at Amy's head, but she managed to duck under it. The crowd made disappointed sounds as his fist hit nothing but air. Amy tried to counterattack, throwing a quick jab at Corvin's ribs. Her fist connected, but it felt like punching a stone wall. The scales that covered his body were not just for show. They were natural armor that could stop small weapons. Her punch did not even make him blink. Corvin backhanded her with his left hand, the blow catching Amy across the shoulder and spinning her around. The force of it sent her stumbling across the arena floor. The crowd cheered as she fought to keep her balance. "Is that all humans can do?" Corvin called out, his voice carrying over the noise. "Run and hide like frightened children?" Amy did not respond. She was already learning things about her opponent that might be useful later. He was fast for his size, but he telegraphed his moves. He also liked to talk, which meant he was confident, maybe too confident. The big warrior pressed his attack, throwing a combination of punches that forced Amy to give ground. She blocked what she could and dodged the rest, but each impact with his fist sent shockwaves through her arms. It was like trying to stop a sledgehammer with her bare hands. One of Corvin's punches got through her defense, catching her in the stomach. The blow doubled her over and drove the air from her lungs. Before she could recover, Corvin grabbed her by the shoulders with both hands. The crowd went wild as the Zephyrian warrior lifted Amy off her feet. He held her up for a moment, letting everyone see how easily he could overpower her. Then, with a roar of triumph, he slammed her down onto the arena floor. The impact was tremendous. The energy-absorbing material of the arena floor was designed to prevent serious injuries, but it still felt like being hit by a truck. Amy's back and shoulders took the full force of the slam, and for a moment stars exploded across her vision. The noise from the crowd was deafening. Aliens from dozens of species were on their feet, cheering for what they thought was the end of the fight. In the human section, Jake Martinez felt his heart sink. Captain Harper had her hands over her face, and several other humans looked away, unable to watch what they thought would be Amy's defeat. Corvin stood over Amy's motionless form, his arms raised in victory. He turned slowly, showing himself to all sections of the arena. The Zephyrian delegation was jumping up and down with excitement. Other species were nodding approval as if this result proved what they had always believed about humans. "You see?" Corvin shouted over the noise. "This is what happens when soft skins try to play with real warriors. Humans are weak. They do not belong in the same league as true fighters." The arena announcer was preparing to declare Corvin the winner when something happened that made the entire crowd fall silent. Amy Burke began to move. First, it was just her fingers, flexing against the arena floor. Then her arms pushed against the ground and slowly, carefully, she began to sit up. Blood was running from the corner of her mouth and her combat suit was torn in several places, but her eyes were clear and focused. The silence in the arena was complete. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy watched in amazement as the small human woman got to her feet. She moved slowly, testing each muscle to make sure it still worked, but she did not make a sound. No groans of pain, no complaints, no calls for help. She simply stood up. Corvin's expression changed from triumph to confusion to anger. "Stay down, human. You are defeated." Amy wiped the blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked at the red stain on her skin for a moment, then raised her eyes to meet Corvin's gaze. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every corner of the arena. "Not yet." Those two words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Beings who had been celebrating moments before now stared in shock. Some had never seen anything like this before. In most species, a blow like that would have ended the fight. The fact that Amy was not only conscious but ready to continue was beyond their understanding. Jake Martinez felt hope flicker back to life in his chest. He knew Amy well enough to recognize that look in her eyes. She was hurt, but she was far from beaten. More importantly, she had learned something from that first exchange. In the arena, Amy began to circle Corvin again, but this time her movements were different. She was not just trying to stay away from him anymore. She was studying him, watching how he moved, looking for patterns and weaknesses. Corvin was no longer smiling. The easy victory he had expected was turning into something else. The human had taken his best shot and gotten back up. That should not have been possible. "Fine," he growled. "If you want more punishment, I will give it to you." But as he moved forward to attack again, something had changed. The confidence he had shown at the beginning of the fight was gone. For the first time in his career, Corvin the Dominator was facing an opponent who would not stay down. In the viewing stands, aliens from dozens of species leaned forward in their seats. This was no longer the simple demonstration of Zephyrian superiority they had expected to watch. This had become something much more interesting. The small human had done something that no previous challenger had managed to do. She had gotten up after taking Corvin's best shot, and she was ready for more. The fight was far from over. Amy's mind was working fast as she circled Corvin for the second time. The slam onto the arena floor had hurt, but it had also taught her valuable information about her opponent. She had felt how his muscles moved when he grabbed her, noticed which leg he favored when he lifted her up, and seen the slight pause he made before throwing his most powerful attacks. More importantly, she had seen something in his eyes when she stood up. Surprise, then confusion. Corvin had expected her to stay down, and when she did not, it had shaken his confidence. Amy planned to use that. The Zephyrian warrior was being more careful now. His first rush had not finished the fight like he expected, and now he was thinking, too much. That was exactly what Amy wanted. An opponent who thought too much was an opponent who made mistakes. Corvin threw another series of punches, but this time, Amy was ready for them. Instead of trying to block or dodge everything, she picked her spots. She let some of the lighter blows hit her arms and shoulders, while avoiding the ones that could really hurt her. Each time his fist connected with her body, she absorbed the impact and kept moving. The crowd was getting restless. They had come to see a quick, brutal demonstration of Zephyrian power. Instead, they were watching what looked like a slow, grinding fight between two very different styles. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Corvin shouted, frustration clear in his voice. Amy said nothing. She had learned long ago that talking during a fight was a waste of energy. Instead, she kept studying him, looking for the opening she needed. It came when Corvin got impatient. The big warrior had been trying to land a knockout blow for several minutes without success. Amy's constant movement was making it hard for him to use his reach advantage. and the crowd was starting to make disappointed noises. Some of the Zephyrian delegation was shouting at Corvin to finish the fight quickly. That pressure made him do exactly what Amy hoped he would do. He abandoned his careful approach and went for one massive attack that would end everything. Corvin planted his feet and drew back his right fist for a punch that would have gone through a steel door. He put all his weight behind it, all his strength, everything he had. It was the kind of blow that had knocked out every previous opponent he had faced, but Amy was not where his fist was aimed. At the last possible second, she stepped to her left and slightly forward. Corvin's massive punch whistled past her head, missing by inches. The force of his own attack pulled him off balance, and for a moment, his left side was completely open. Amy did not waste the opportunity. She had been watching Corvin carefully during the entire fight, and she had noticed something interesting about his anatomy. Like many warrior species, Zephyrians had thick armor plating over most of their vital areas. But they also had nerve clusters at certain points that were less protected, probably because their own species never targeted those spots in combat. Amy's counterattack was not a wild swing or a desperate attempt to hurt her opponent. It was a precise, calculated strike aimed at a specific point just below Corvin's left shoulder blade. Her fist hit a nerve cluster that controlled balance and muscle coordination in Zephyrian physiology. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Corvin's eyes went wide with shock as his nervous system suddenly stopped working properly. His legs turned to rubber and his arms went numb. The great warrior, who had seemed unstoppable moments before, collapsed to the arena floor like a puppet with cut strings. The silence in the arena was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy stared in, complete disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The small human woman stood over the fallen Zephyrian warrior, breathing hard but still on her feet. Corvin was not unconscious, but he could not move. His nervous system was slowly recovering from Amy's strike, but it would take several minutes before he could stand again. Amy looked down at her opponent for a moment, then stepped back and waited. She could have pressed her attack, could have continued hitting him while he was helpless, but she did not. That was not how humans fought. They defeated their enemies, but they did not torture them. The arena announcer, the floating jellyfish creature, seemed as shocked as everyone else. Its voice wavered as it made the official declaration. Winner, Lieutenant Amy Burke, representing humanity. The words seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the crowd. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, but it was not the cheering that had greeted Corvin's early dominance. This was the sound of confusion, amazement, and fear. In the human section, Jake Martinez felt like he could breathe again for the first time since the fight began. Captain Harper was on her feet, a huge smile on her face. Commander Peterson was frantically taking notes, probably already planning how to use this victory in future negotiations. But it was not just the humans who were reacting. All around the arena, representatives from different species were having urgent conversations. Some looked worried, others seemed excited. A few appeared to be reconsidering everything they thought they knew about humans. The Zephyrian delegation was in chaos. Their unbeatable champion was lying on the arena floor, defeated by a being they had considered inferior. War Chief Thane, Corvin's commander, was shouting orders at his staff, but Amy could not hear what he was saying over the crowd noise. Amy herself was still standing in the center of the arena, waiting for the medical team to check on Corvin. The big warrior was beginning to recover some movement in his arms and legs, and his eyes were focusing properly again. He would be fine, but his pride would take much longer to heal than his body. When the medical team gave the all-clear, Amy walked over to where Corvin was slowly sitting up. She extended her hand to help him to his feet. For a moment, the Zephyrian warrior just stared at her, offered hand. Then, showing more grace than he had displayed during their pre-fight trash talk, he accepted her help and allowed her to pull him upright. How? He asked quietly. His voice meant only for her ears. Humans learn to adapt, Amy replied simply. We study our opponents, find their weaknesses, and exploit them. It is not about being the strongest. It is about being the smartest. Corvin nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. I underestimated you. All of us did. Yes, Amy said. You did. As they walked toward their respective exits from the arena, the crowd began to settle down, but the conversations continued. Word of what had happened was already spreading beyond Nexus Prime, carried by the dozens of news services that covered arena events. Across the galaxy, beings were learning that they had been wrong about humans. The small, soft-skinned species, from the edge of known space, had just proven they belonged in the same league as any warrior race. The age of underestimating humanity had just come to an end. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Within an hour of Amy's victory, every major news network in the galaxy was running the story. The footage of the fight was being broadcast to hundreds of worlds, watched by billions of beings who had never paid much attention to humans before. In the crystal gardens of Vorthak Prime, the crystalline beings who made up the Vorthak Collective gathered around their central communication hub. Their bodies rang like bells as they vibrated with excitement, discussing what they had just witnessed. The Vorthak were an ancient race, older than most of the current galactic powers, and they had seen many species rise and fall over the millennia. Fascinating, chimed Elder Resonance, whose crystal body glowed with deep blue light. The human did not rely on superior strength or natural weapons. She used intelligence and observation to defeat a physically superior opponent. This matches the reports we have been receiving about human military tactics, added Harmonic 7, a younger Vorthak whose body sparked with silver light. They consistently defeat enemies who should be stronger than them by using unexpected strategies. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. In the floating cities of the Nebula Drifters, gaseous beings who rarely took solid form were condensing into temporary bodies just so they could better discuss the implications of what they had seen. The small human absorbed damage that would have destroyed most organic beings, whispered Wind That Carries Stars, one of their senior philosophers. Yet she continued fighting with no decrease in effectiveness. This suggests remarkable physical and mental resilience. Even the Hive Collective, the insectoid species known for their emotionless approach to everything, were taking notice. In their vast underground cities, worker drones were carrying messages between the different castes at unprecedented speed. Queen Mind 779, one of the collective's tactical specialists, studied the arena footage with compound eyes that could see details invisible to most other species. Analysis indicates the human female identified weaknesses in Zephyrian anatomy that our own combat specialists had not previously documented. This suggests superior observational skills and adaptive intelligence. But it was not just the peaceful species who were paying attention. In the war rooms of a dozen different military powers, strategists were having urgent meetings about what Amy's victory meant for their own plans and ambitions. The Dominion of Scar, humanity's greatest enemy, had been planning a major offensive against human colonies in the Outer Rim. Their entire strategy was based on the assumption that humans were weak and poorly organized. Now, High Commander Vask found himself staring at combat reports that suddenly made a lot less sense. How many times have our forces encountered unexpected resistance from human colonies? He demanded of his intelligence chief. 17 major engagements in the past year, Commander, replied Intelligence Director Kren, his tentacles writhing nervously. In each case, human defenders held out much longer than projections indicated they should have been able to. And how many times did we attribute this to faulty intelligence rather than superior human tactics? All 17 times, Commander. Vask's mandibles clicked together in frustration. The Dominion had been treating humans like a minor irritation rather than a serious threat. That was clearly a mistake that needed to be corrected immediately. Meanwhile, back on Nexus Prime, the human delegation was dealing with the immediate aftermath of Amy's victory. Captain Lisa Harper found herself at the center of a diplomatic storm as representatives from dozens of species requested immediate meetings. The Centauri Brotherhood wants to discuss a mutual defense pact, reported Commander Nick Peterson, reading from a datapad that was constantly updating with new messages. The Free Traders Alliance is offering exclusive shipping contracts. The Academic Council wants to establish exchange programs with human universities. What about the Zephyrians? Lisa asked. War Chief Thane has requested a private meeting. He says he wants to discuss adjusting their previous position regarding human membership in the Galactic Trade Federation. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. The Trade Federation was one of the most important organizations in the galaxy. Human membership had been blocked for years by species who claimed humans were not advanced enough to participate as equals. If the Zephyrians were willing to change their position, it could open doors that had been closed to humanity for decades. But the most interesting reactions were coming from species that had previously shown little interest in humans at all. The Shadow Consortium, a mysterious organization that rarely communicated with anyone, had sent an encrypted message requesting a meeting with human leaders. The message was brief, but intriguing. Your species shows potential we had not previously recognized. We wish to discuss matters of mutual interest. Even more surprising was the message from the Eternal Archive, a group of ancient beings who were rumored to be older than the current galactic civilization. They claimed to preserve the knowledge and history of countless species, and they had never shown any interest in humanity before. We have observed your performance with interest, their message read. Your species demonstrates qualities that we have seen in only a few races throughout galactic history. We would be honored to include human achievements in our permanent records. Amy herself was trying to process everything that was happening around her. She had expected to fight Corvin and either win or lose. She had not expected her victory to trigger galaxy-wide political changes. I just wanted to defend our honor, she told Jake, as they sat in the human delegation's quarters aboard Nexus Prime. I did not think about what would happen afterward. That is exactly why it worked, Jake replied. You were not trying to impress anyone or make a political statement. You were just being yourself, doing what you thought was right. That is what made it so powerful. Outside their quarters, the corridors of Nexus Prime were buzzing with activity. Diplomatic pouches were being rushed to starships heading for every corner of the galaxy. News reporters from hundreds of different species were trying to get interviews with anyone who would talk to them. The arena where the fight had taken place was being preserved as a historical site. In the days that followed, more footage would emerge, showing the fight from different angles. Slow-motion replays would analyze every move Amy had made, every decision that led to her victory. Combat instructors across the galaxy would study her techniques, trying to understand how she had identified and exploited weaknesses that no one else had noticed. But perhaps the most important reaction came from ordinary beings across the galaxy who had never thought much about humans before. They watched the footage of a small woman getting up after being slammed into the ground, refusing to quit, and then finding a way to win against impossible odds. For many of them, it was the first time they had seen humans as anything more than another minor species trying to find their place in the galaxy. Now they were beginning to understand that humans might be something much more interesting than they had realized. The galaxy was starting to pay attention to humanity, and everything was about to change. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez had been humanity's chief diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council for 8 years. In that time, she had attended hundreds of meetings, negotiated dozens of trade agreements, and fought countless battles for human recognition and respect. But she had never experienced anything like the chaos that followed Amy Burke's victory in the arena. Her personal communication device had been ringing nonstop for 3 days. Every major power in the galaxy seemed to want to talk to her, and many of them were saying things she had never expected to hear. Ambassador Rodriguez, came the smooth voice of Diplomatic Prime Zenth of the Altarian Republic. My government wishes to extend a formal invitation for human representatives to visit our core worlds. We believe there may be opportunities for cooperation that we have previously overlooked. Elena smiled as she recorded her response. The Altarians had been polite but distant toward humans for years, treating them like junior partners at best. Now they were talking about cooperation. Between equals. The call ended and immediately another one began. This time it was from the Galactic Banking Consortium, offering human worlds access to development loans that had previously been denied. After that came a message from the United Mining Guild, proposing joint ventures in asteroid mining operations. Each conversation was different, but they all had the same underlying message. The galaxy was reconsidering what it thought about humanity. The most important call came on the fourth day after the fight. The holographic image of Council Speaker Vex materialized in Elena's office, the ancient being's forearms moving in the formal gestures of high-level diplomatic greeting. Ambassador Rodriguez, Speaker Vex said in the clicking musical language of his species. The Galactic Council has voted to fast-track humanity's application for full membership status. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Humans had been trying to achieve full council membership for 25 years. They had been blocked repeatedly by species who claimed humans were too young, too aggressive, or too unpredictable to be trusted, with a full vote in galactic affairs. That is wonderful news, Speaker Vex. May I ask what changed the Council's position? Recent events have demonstrated that humanity possesses qualities that the Council values highly. Your species shows remarkable resilience, adaptability, and tactical thinking. These are traits that we believe would benefit the galactic community as a whole. What Speaker Vex did not mention, but Elena understood perfectly, was that Amy's victory had scared some of the Council's more powerful members. If humans could consistently defeat opponents who should have been stronger than them, it meant human military capabilities had been seriously underestimated. Better to have humans inside the Council where they could be watched and influenced, rather than outside where they might become a threat. The political changes were not limited to positive developments. The Dominion of Scar, which had been humanity's primary adversary for decades, was also adjusting their approach. But their adjustments were taking a much more aggressive direction. High Commander Vask had called an emergency session of the Dominion's War Council. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from the Dominion's various member species, all of them focused on the holographic display showing footage from Amy's fight. This changes everything, Vask announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. We have been treating the humans as a minor irritation. That was clearly a mistake. War leader Thex of the Brutari clans raised one of his massive clawed hands. Commander, surely you are not suggesting that one arena fight represents a serious military threat. I am suggesting, Vask replied coldly, that we have been underestimating human capabilities across the board. Review the combat reports from our recent engagements with human forces. Look at them again, but this time assume that human tactical superiority is deliberate rather than accidental. The chamber fell silent as the various commanders began to understand what Vask was implying. If humans were not winning through luck or coincidence, but through superior strategy and adaptability, then every previous analysis of human military strength was worthless. What do you recommend, Commander? Asked Admiral Scree of the Void Hunters. We accelerate our offensive plans, Vask said. Hit the human colonies before they have time to consolidate their new political alliances. If we wait too long, they may become too well protected to attack effectively. While the Dominion was planning military action, other species were taking a completely different approach. The Centauri Brotherhood, a confederation of honor-based warrior cultures, saw Amy's victory as proof that humans shared their values. Brother Captain Aldrich stood before the Brotherhood's High Council, arguing passionately for a formal alliance with humanity. The human female showed perfect warrior spirit, he declared. She faced a superior opponent with courage, absorbed punishment without complaint, and found victory through skill and determination. These are the qualities we value above all others. But they are not natural warriors like ourselves, countered Brother Elder Korath. They lack our strength, our natural weapons, our bred-in fighting instincts, which makes their achievements even more impressive, Aldrich replied. We were born for war. They chose it and they excel at it through pure will and intelligence. I would rather have such beings as allies than as enemies. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Brotherhood valued courage and tactical skill above all else, and Amy had demonstrated both in abundance. Perhaps the most unexpected reaction came from the Academic Council, the galaxy's premier scientific organization. Dr. Helix 9, a renowned xenobiologist, had spent weeks studying footage of the arena fight from a purely scientific perspective. The human demonstrates several capabilities that we have not previously documented in their species, Dr. Helix reported to her colleagues. Her pain tolerance, recovery speed, and adaptive learning rate all exceed our previous measurements by significant margins. Are you suggesting that humans have been hiding their true capabilities? Asked Professor Vort, the Council's expert on comparative species development. I am suggesting that we may have been testing humans under the wrong conditions, Dr. Helix replied. Our standard evaluation protocols are designed for laboratory settings, but humans appear to perform at much higher levels under stress conditions that would impair most other species. This scientific interest was leading to new research proposals and exchange programs that could benefit both humans and the broader galactic community. Universities across the galaxy were submitting requests to study human physiology, psychology, and military tactics. Back on Earth, human leaders were struggling to keep up with all the new opportunities and challenges. President Angela Cole called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council to discuss how to handle the sudden shift in galactic politics. We have gone from being ignored to being the center of attention overnight, she told the assembled leaders. That creates opportunities, but it also creates dangers. Some species want to be our friends, others want to study us, and at least one wants to wipe us out before we become too powerful. General Marcus Stone, the head of Earth's military forces, nodded grimly. Our intelligence networks are reporting increased Dominion fleet movements near our outer colonies. They are planning something big, and they are planning it soon. Then we had better be ready, President Cole replied. Get me a direct line. To Ambassador Rodriguez. It is time to start calling in some of these new friendships we have been offered. As the leaders of humanity began to navigate their species' sudden rise in galactic importance, one thing was becoming clear. Amy Burke's victory in the arena had been much more than a single combat match. It had been the moment when the galaxy stopped seeing humans as harmless newcomers and started seeing them as potential equals. Whether that change would lead to new alliances and opportunities, or to new conflicts and dangers, remained to be seen. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Clark specialized in finding patterns that other people missed. As the head of human intelligence operations, he spent most of his time analyzing data streams from across the galaxy, looking for threats and opportunities that might affect human interests. 3 weeks after Amy's victory, he found something that made his blood run cold. Ryan sat in his secure office aboard the intelligence vessel Watchful Eye, staring at multiple screens displaying information from dozens of different sources. Financial, records, shipping manifests, communication intercepts, and diplomatic reports all painted pieces of a picture that was becoming increasingly clear and increasingly disturbing. Computer display correlation analysis for Nexus Prime Arena events previous 6 months, he said. A new screen lit up, showing a timeline of arena matches. Ryan had been tracking something that bothered him about the timing of Amy's challenge. Combat challenges for species honor were rare, but they were not unheard of. What was unusual was how perfectly the circumstances had been arranged. The more he dug, the more suspicious everything looked. Corvin's arrival at Nexus Prime had been scheduled weeks in advance, but the official reason for his presence kept changing in the records. First, it was listed as a routine diplomatic visit, then a trade negotiation, then a cultural exchange. Ryan pulled up financial records for the Zephyrian delegation. Someone had paid for extended accommodations at Nexus Prime's most expensive hotels. Someone had also purchased exclusive broadcast rights for any arena events that might occur during their stay. Computer, cross-reference payment sources with known Dominion financial networks. The results made Ryan's suspicions look like certainty. The payments were coming through a complex network of shell companies and intermediary banks, but the ultimate source was clear: the Dominion of Scar. They set the whole thing up, Ryan muttered to himself. They knew exactly what they were doing. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. The Dominion could not directly attack humanity's growing diplomatic influence without seeming like aggressors, but they could arrange for humanity to be publicly humiliated by a superior warrior species. Corvin's insults during the trade meeting had not been spontaneous outbursts. They had been carefully scripted provocations designed to force a human representative into an unwinnable fight. The Dominion's intelligence services had studied human psychology extensively. They knew that humans had a strong sense of honor and would not back down from a direct challenge to their species' worth. They also knew that no human could possibly defeat Corvin in single combat, except that Amy had defeated him, and now the Dominion's plan had backfired spectacularly. Ryan called up additional files tracking the movements of Dominion agents throughout the galaxy over the past month. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Instead of backing down after their plan failed, the Dominion was doubling down on military action. "Captain Stone," Ryan said, activating his secure communication system, "I need an immediate priority meeting with you and Admiral Morrison. We have a major problem." 2 hours later, Ryan was standing in the briefing room of the flagship Valiant, facing Captain Marcus Stone and Admiral Frank Morrison. Both men listened in grim silence as Ryan laid out his findings. "So you are telling us that Amy's fight was a setup from the beginning?" Captain Stone asked. "That is exactly what I'm telling you," Ryan replied. "The Dominion arranged for humanity to be publicly humiliated. When that plan failed, they moved to Plan B, direct military action while we are still distracted by all the new diplomatic opportunities." Admiral Morrison studied the tactical displays Ryan had prepared. "What kind of time frame are we looking at?" "Based on fleet movement patterns and supply requisitions, I estimate they will launch their offensive within 2 weeks. They are massing forces at 3 different staging areas, all positioned to strike at our outer colonies simultaneously." The implications were staggering. If the Dominion attacked human colonies while most of the human fleet was scattered across the galaxy handling new diplomatic missions, the results could be catastrophic. Millions of human civilians were living on frontier worlds that had minimal military protection. "How confident are you in this analysis?" Admiral Morrison asked. 95%, Ryan replied. "The pattern is too clear and too consistent to be coincidental. They have been planning this for months, possibly years." Captain Stone was already pulling up fleet deployment records. "We have ships spread across 20 different systems right now, all handling the diplomatic fallout from Amy's victory. If we pull them back to defend the colonies, we lose all the political ground we just gained. And if we do not pull them back, we lose the colonies," Admiral Morrison pointed out grimly. Ryan had been thinking about this problem for days, and he thought he might have a solution. "There is a third option. We let them know that we know." Both officers looked at him with interest. "The Dominion's plan depends on surprise," Ryan continued. "They expect to hit our colonies before we realize what is happening. But if we can prove that their arena setup was an act of war disguised as diplomacy, we can turn their own plan against them." "Explain," Admiral Morrison said. "We take our evidence to the Galactic Council. We show them proof that the Dominion tried to manipulate galactic politics through deception and fraud. When the Dominion attacks our colonies, it will not look like legitimate military action. It will look like the desperate move of a power that got caught cheating." Captain Stone nodded slowly. "And some of our new friends might decide to help us deal with that kind of behavior." "Exactly. The Centauri Brotherhood values honor above everything else. If we can prove the Dominion acted dishonorably, they will consider it their duty to stand with us. The Academic Council hates being manipulated, and the banking consortium does not like financial fraud." Admiral Morrison was already making notes. "We will need ironclad evidence. Accusations this serious require absolute proof." "I have been working on that," Ryan said. "Give me another week, and I can trace every payment, every communication, and every staged event back to Dominion intelligence operations. When I am finished, even the Dominion's allies will have trouble defending their actions." The meeting continued for another hour as the 3 men planned humanity's response to the Dominion's deception. It would be a complex operation requiring perfect timing and flawless execution. As Ryan left the briefing room, he thought about Amy Burke's arena fight again. She had faced an opponent who seemed unbeatable, studied his weaknesses, and found a way to turn his strength against him. Now humanity was facing a similar challenge on a much larger scale. The Dominion had superior numbers, better technology, and decades of military experience. But they had also made the same mistake Corvin had made. They had underestimated their human opponents. Ryan smiled grimly as he returned to his intelligence analysis. The Dominion was about to learn the same lesson Corvin had learned in the arena. When fighting humans, superior strength meant nothing if your opponent was smart enough to find your weaknesses and patient enough to wait for the right moment to strike. The real game was just beginning, and this time, humanity would be ready for it. Colonel Janet Wells had been running combat training programs for the Human Defense Forces for 15 years. She had trained soldiers for 3 different wars, developed new fighting techniques for zero-gravity combat, and written the manual on close-quarters battle tactics that every human military academy used. But she had never been as excited about a training program as she was about the one she was developing, based on Amy Burke's arena victory. "Show me the replay again," Janet said to her assistant Lieutenant Tony Martinez. Slow motion, starting from when Corvin grabs her. The holographic display in the center of the training room showed Amy's fight from multiple angles. Janet had been studying this footage for weeks, breaking down every move, every decision, every split-second choice that had led to Amy's victory. "There," she said, pausing the display. "Look at her face when he lifts her up. She is not panicking. She is not trying to break free. She is studying him, learning how his muscles work, how he balances his weight." Lieutenant Martinez nodded. Most fighters would have been focused on trying to escape or minimize the damage from the slam. Exactly. But Amy was already planning her counterattack before she even hit the ground. That is what we need to teach our people, how to turn every moment of a fight into a learning opportunity. The new training program that Janet was developing was unlike anything the human military had used before. Instead of focusing on strength training and weapons practice, it emphasized observation, adaptation, and tactical thinking under extreme stress. The first phase was called damage assessment training. Soldiers learned to evaluate their own injuries in real time during combat, distinguishing between wounds that were serious and those that just hurt. Amy had taken a brutal slam that would have discouraged most fighters, but she had quickly realized that she was hurt but not disabled. "Pain is information," Janet told the group of instructors she was training to teach the new methods. "Our soldiers need to learn to process that information without letting it control their actions." The second phase was adaptive combat analysis. This taught soldiers to study their opponents continuously during a fight, looking for patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. Traditional combat training focused on executing predetermined techniques, but Amy's victory showed the importance of creative problem-solving in the moment. "Every opponent has weaknesses," Janet explained. "Our job is not just to fight harder than they do, but to fight smarter. We need to see what they cannot see about themselves." The most challenging part of the new program was stress state learning. This trained soldiers to maintain analytical thinking even when under extreme physical and emotional pressure. Amy had made her most important observations about Corvin's anatomy while being slammed into the arena floor. Word of the new training methods spread quickly through the human military. Admiral Morrison had made the program mandatory for all Special Forces units, and regular Army commanders were requesting access to the materials for their own troops. The results were impressive. Human soldiers who completed the new training program showed dramatic improvements in performance against simulated opponents. More importantly, they were developing a reputation for unpredictability that was making enemies across the galaxy reconsider their assumptions about human military capabilities. Sergeant Rebecca Foster was one of the first soldiers to complete the full program. She had been a good fighter before, but the new training had transformed her approach to combat completely. "I used to think fighting was about being tougher than the other guy," she told her squad during a training exercise on the colony world New Dallas. "Now I understand that it is about being smarter. You have to think 3 moves ahead while you are taking punishment in the present." Her squad was preparing for potential Dominion attacks by practicing against combat robots, programmed with Dominion fighting techniques. The robots were stronger and faster than human soldiers, just like Corvin had been stronger and faster than Amy. "Remember," Rebecca called out as her soldiers engaged the training robots, Do not try to match their strength. Look for the patterns in how they move. Every fighting style has weaknesses built into it. The training exercise continued for hours, with human soldiers learning to defeat opponents who should have been superior to them in every way. By the end of the session, even the newest recruits were finding ways to outmaneuver and defeat the combat robots. Similar training sessions were taking place on dozens of human worlds. The techniques Amy had used in the arena were being adapted and refined for different types of combat situations. What had started as one woman's instinctive fighting style was becoming a new military doctrine for the entire human species. The changes were not limited to individual combat training. Human military strategists were applying the same principles to fleet tactics and planetary defense. Instead of trying to match enemy forces ship for ship, human commanders were learning to identify strategic weaknesses and exploit them with surgical precision. Captain Steve Johnson, who commanded the destroyer Rapid Strike, had been experimenting with new tactical approaches based on Amy's example. During a recent training exercise, his ship had successfully defeated a simulated Dominion battle group that outnumbered and outgunned him by a significant margin. "We did not try to fight them head-on," he reported to Admiral Morrison. "Instead, we studied their formation patterns and identified a weakness in their communication protocols. By hitting their command ship at exactly the right moment, we were able to disrupt their coordination and defeat them piecemeal." These tactical innovations were happening at every level of the human military. Squad leaders, ship captains, and planetary defense commanders were all finding new ways to turn human adaptability into a strategic advantage. The Dominion was beginning to notice these changes. Their intelligence reports were filled with accounts of human forces performing far above expectations. What had once been easy victories against human colonies were becoming costly battles that sometimes ended in Dominion defeat. High Commander Vask was reading one such report when he received an urgent message from his field commanders. A Dominion raiding force had attacked the human mining colony on Kepler-7, expecting to overwhelm the small defense garrison within hours. Instead, they had been fighting for 3 days and were requesting reinforcements. "How is this possible?" Vask demanded during an emergency strategy meeting. "Kepler-7 has fewer than 1,000 military personnel. We sent 5,000 elite troops to take it." War leader Thex looked uncomfortable as he delivered his report. "The humans are not fighting the way our tactical models predicted, Commander. They are using unconventional strategies that our forces were not prepared for." "Give me specifics." "They allowed our forces to capture the main settlement, then used hidden tunnels to attack our supply lines. When we adjusted our position to protect our supplies, they hit our communication arrays. Every time we think we understand their strategy, they change it." Vask stared at the tactical displays, showing the battle for Kepler-7. The human defenders were vastly outnumbered, but they were fighting with a creativity and adaptability that his forces could not match. "Recall the attack force," he ordered finally. "We need to reconsider our entire approach to fighting humans." As news of the successful defense of Kepler-7 spread through human space, military recruitment offices saw a massive increase in applications. Young humans who had watched Amy's arena fight were now volunteering to learn the same techniques she had used. The training revolution that had started with one woman's victory in an alien arena was transforming humanity's entire approach to warfare. Soldiers who had been taught to fight harder were learning to fight smarter. The results were already changing the balance of power across the galaxy. Amy Burke's greatest victory had not been defeating Corvin in single combat. It had been showing humanity a new way to think about conflict itself. In a universe full of species with natural advantages, humans were learning to make their intelligence and adaptability into the ultimate weapons. 6 months had passed since Amy Burke stepped into the arena on Nexus Prime, and the galaxy was a very different place. Major Amy Burke, she had been promoted 3 times since the fight, stood in the observation deck of the new Human Combat Development Center, watching the latest group of recruits complete their final training exercise. The center was built on Luna, humanity's moon, and it had become one of the most respected military training facilities in the galaxy. Representatives from a dozen different species had requested permission to observe human training methods, and some had even asked to send their own warriors to learn from human instructors. "How do they look?" asked Colonel Steve Johnson, who had become Amy's second-in-command at the center. "Like humans," Amy replied with a smile. "They started out trying to be stronger and faster than their opponents. Now they are learning to be smarter." The training exercise below them was a complex scenario involving human soldiers working with alien allies to defend a colony from multiple types of attackers. The humans were not the strongest or fastest members of the mixed teams, but they were consistently the ones who found solutions to problems that seemed impossible. Amy watched as Sergeant Lisa Park identified a weakness in the simulated enemy's defensive formation and led a combined human Centauri assault team through a gap that no one else had noticed. The attack succeeded brilliantly, and the entire exercise was over within minutes. "The Centauri are fast learners," Steve observed. "They have adapted their fighting style to work with ours better than I expected." "They understand honor," Amy said. "Once they accepted that intelligence was just as honorable as strength, they embraced our methods completely." The partnership between humanity and the Centauri Brotherhood had been one of the most successful diplomatic developments of the past 6 months. Brother Captain Aldrich, who had argued for the alliance after watching Amy's fight, was now working directly with human military planners to develop new joint tactics. But the Centauri were not the only species who had become close allies of humanity. The Academic Council had established permanent research stations in human space, studying everything from human psychology to military strategy. The banking consortium had provided the funding for massive infrastructure projects on human worlds. Even the mysterious Shadow Consortium had revealed themselves to be potential partners, sharing intelligence about Dominion activities in exchange for access to human tactical innovations. The Galactic Council had not just granted humanity full membership, they had appointed a human representative to the Security Committee, recognizing that human military expertise was valuable to the entire galactic community. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez now held one of the most influential positions in galactic politics. Her office on the council station was constantly busy with meetings, negotiations, and planning sessions for joint operations between human forces and council peacekeeping units. The Altarian Republic wants to establish a joint training facility in their territory, Elena reported during her weekly meeting with Earth's leadership. The Vorthak Collective is offering to share their advanced sensor technologies in exchange for human tactical training. The Mining Guild wants human security teams to protect their operations in contested space. President Angela Cole nodded with satisfaction. 6 months ago, most of these species barely acknowledged our existence. Now they are competing for our partnership. "It has been a remarkable transformation," agreed General Marcus Stone. "But we cannot forget that it also made us new enemies. The Dominion has not given up on their plans to destroy us." The Dominion of Scar had indeed escalated their efforts against humanity, but their attacks were no longer the easy victories they had expected. Ryan Clark's intelligence operations had exposed several Dominion plots before they could be implemented, and the improved training of human forces meant that even successful Dominion attacks came at a much higher cost than before. More importantly, humanity was no longer fighting alone. When the Dominion attacked the human colony on New Geneva, Centauri Brotherhood warships arrived within hours to help with the defense. When Dominion agents tried to sabotage human trade shipments, banking, consortium security forces provided protection. When Dominion propaganda tried to turn other species against humanity, Academic Council researchers published detailed studies proving the claims were false. The arena fight that had started as an attempt to humiliate humanity had instead created a network of alliances that made humanity much stronger than they had ever been before. Amy herself had become something of a celebrity across the galaxy, but she tried to stay focused on her real work, training the next generation of human warriors and developing new tactics for an ever-changing universe. Major Burke called Lieutenant Jenny Garcia, one of the center's newest instructors. "The Zephyrian delegation has arrived for their appointment." Amy smiled. The Zephyrians had requested this meeting themselves, a development that no one could have predicted 6 months ago. War Chief Thane, who had initially supported Corvin's challenge, now wanted to discuss joint training exercises between Zephyrian and human forces. The meeting took place in the center's main conference room. Thane arrived with a small group of his best warriors, including Corvin himself. The big warrior who had once seemed so intimidating now looked almost nervous as he faced Amy across the conference table. Major Burke, Thane began formally, my government wishes to apologize for the disrespectful behavior of our delegation during the initial trade negotiations. We have since learned that our assumptions about human capabilities were incomplete. Thank you for saying that, Amy replied diplomatically. But there is no need for apologies. Your challenge gave me an opportunity to demonstrate human potential. In many ways, you did us a favor. Corvin leaned forward slightly. Major, I have studied recordings of our fight many times. I still do not fully understand how you identified the weakness in our nervous system structure. Our own medical experts were not aware that such a vulnerability existed. That is because you were looking at it from the inside, Amy explained. When you belong to a species, you see its strengths but not always its weaknesses. Humans have learned to look at problems from the outside to see patterns that insiders might miss. The discussion continued for hours, covering everything from anatomical vulnerabilities to tactical psychology. By the end of the meeting, Thane had agreed to send a group of young Zephyrian warriors to train at the Human Center, while Amy would visit Zephyrian military academies to teach her observation techniques to their instructors. As the Zephyrian delegation prepared to leave, Corvin approached Amy privately. I want you to know, he said quietly, that losing to you was the most valuable experience of my military career. It taught me that strength without wisdom is just potential waiting to be defeated by someone smarter. And fighting you taught me that humans can compete with anyone in the galaxy if we use our minds as well as our bodies, Amy replied. We both learned something important that day. Later that evening, Amy stood alone in her office, looking out at the stars through the large viewport that dominated one wall. Earth hung in the sky like a blue and white jewel, beautiful and peaceful from this distance. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message. It was from Jake Martinez, who was now commanding the exploration vessel Pioneer on the far edge of human space. Amy, his recorded message began, I wanted you to know that we just made first contact with a new species called the Corvani. They are incredibly advanced, probably more so than any race we have encountered before. When they asked about humanity's military capabilities, I told them about a communications officer who once defeated a champion warrior. Through pure determination and intelligence, they were impressed enough to request a formal meeting with our diplomats. Your reputation is opening doors in places we have never even explored before. Amy smiled as the message ended. The fight in the arena had been about defending human honor, but it had become something much more important. It had changed how humanity saw itself and how the galaxy saw humanity. She thought about all the young humans training in facilities across the galaxy, learning to turn their minds into weapons more powerful than any natural armor or superior strength. She thought about the alliances that were growing stronger every day, built on mutual respect rather than fear or convenience. Most importantly, she thought about the future that was opening up before humanity. They were no longer the newcomers trying to find their place in an established order. They had earned their own place through courage, intelligence, and the willingness to stand up for what they believed in. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges that no one had yet imagined, but Amy was confident that humanity was ready for whatever came next. They had learned the most important lesson of all. It was not about being the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced. It was about getting back up when you were knocked down, learning from every experience and never giving up on the belief that intelligence and determination could overcome any obstacle. The age of humanity in the galactic community had truly begun.